The kindness on the A34. In the grey drizzle of a late autumn afternoon in Northamptonshire, where the fields roll like forgotten promises under a sky the colour of old slate, Emily Hargrove gripped the steering wheel of her battered Ford Fiesta with the kind of determination that comes from knowing one's luck is as thin as the wipers struggling against the windscreen. It was 3:47 p.m., and she was already 12 minutes late for what her fiancé, Thomas, had billed as the most important lunch of our lives. The Hargroves, Thomas's family, weren't just wealthy, they were the sort of landed gentry who traced their lineage back to some Norman baron who'd probably pillaged his way through the Danelaw. Their estate, Ashford Hall, loomed on the horizon like a Gothic novel come to life, all crenellated towers and ivy-cloaked stone, a place where the air smelled of polished oak and quiet disapproval. Emily, at 28, was a primary school teacher from a terraced house in Leicester, where the walls were thin and the dreams were thinner. She'd met Thomas 3 years prior at a charity gala in London, him in a tailored suit that cost more than her annual salary, her in a borrowed dress from a high street rack. He was charming, with his easy laugh and the way he quoted Keats as if it were small talk. She was real, with her freckles and her habit of leaving tea stains on important documents. Against all odds, they'd clicked, and now here she was, hurtling down the A34 towards a meeting with the in-laws to-be, her stomach churning like the M1 on a bank holiday. The Fiesta spluttered just past the Wheaton roundabout, a cough of exhaust that turned into a full-throated wheeze. Emily swore under her breath, none of that posh profanity Thomas favored, just the blunt Leicestershire variety. She pulled over onto the grass verge, the car shuddering to a halt amid a chorus of honking lorries. Rain pattered on the roof like impatient fingers. She popped the bonnet, peering into the engine bay with the expertise of someone who'd once watched a YouTube tutorial on oil changes. Wires and tubes stared back, mocking her. That's when she saw the other car, an ancient Vauxhall Cavalier, its paintwork faded to the hue of stewed tea, stalled 100 yards ahead. An old woman stood beside it, hunched under a translucent mackintosh that did little to shield her from the downpour. She was poking at the wheel with a brawly, her white hair escaping in wisps like smoke signals of distress. Emily hesitated. The clock on her dash blinked accusingly, 3:52. Thomas's mother, Lady Victoria Hargrove, was not a woman who tolerated tardiness. Emily had heard the stories, maids dismissed for serving soup a degree too cool, gardeners sacked for a lawn stripe askew. But something in the old woman's stoop, the way her shoulders rounded against the wind, tugged at Emily's chest. It was the same pull that made her stay late at school for the kid who'd forgotten his lunch, or mend a colleague's broken heel during assembly. Bugger it, Emily muttered, grabbing her toolkit, a battered plastic box from B&Q, and trudging over. The rain soaked her woolen coat, turning it into a sodden weight. All right, love? Need a hand? The old woman looked up, her face a map of wrinkles etched by decades of Midlands winters. Her eyes, sharp as cut glass behind bifocals, sized Emily up. If you're offering, lass, I'll not say no. This old girl's given up the ghost again. Name's Doris. Doris Wilkins. Emily. What's she doing, then? Not turning over? Doris shook her head, handing over the keys with gnarled fingers that spoke of a lifetime scrubbing pots or tending allotments. Battery's flat as a witch's tit, I reckon. Been trying to jump it with me phone, but that's daft, innit? Emily chuckled, despite the urgency gnawing at her. She connected the leads from her own car, thank God the Fiesta was still alive, and in 10 minutes, the Cavalier roared to life with a belch of blue smoke. Doris clapped her hands, her laugh a cackle that cut through the rain. You're a proper marvel, you are. Most folk drive on by. Here, have a buddy. From her capacious handbag, she produced a greaseproof paper parcel, ham and pickle sandwiches, cut into neat triangles, the bread soft and yielding. Emily's stomach growled. Lunch had been a hasty granola bar at the school gates. She took one, the mustard sharp on her tongue. Ta. Got to dash, mind. Big do up the road. Doris nodded sagely, packing away her brawly. Life's full of You take care now. And remember, kindness costs nout but weighs a ton. She climbed into her car, giving a wave that lingered like a benediction, and puttered off towards Northampton, leaving Emily with crumbs on her lap and a warmth that defied the chill. By the time Emily reached Ashford Hall, it was 4:21. The gravel drive crunched under her tires like accusatory whispers. She parked beside a fleet of gleaming Range Rovers and a vintage Bentley that probably had its own postcode. Smoothing her damp skirt, she approached the porticoed entrance, where a butler, straight out of Downton Abbey, complete with starched collar, eyed her dripping form with the enthusiasm of a man inspecting a wet sock. "Miss Hargrove? You're expected in the Rose Parlor." Emily followed him through halls lined with oil paintings of stern ancestors, their eyes following her like jury members. The Rose Parlor was a vision of chintz and crystal, floral wallpaper that climbed the walls like rampant ivy, a fire crackling in a marble grate, and at its center, the Hargrove clan. Thomas rose first, his fair hair catching the light, concern etching his brow. "Darling. We were worried." Lady Victoria, a woman of 60 with the posture of a ramrod and pearls the size of quail eggs, did not rise. Her lips pursed, thin as a miser's purse. "Miss Hargrove. Punctuality is the politesse of kings, or so Talleyrand observed. One might expect a future daughter-in-law to grasp such niceties." Beside her, Sir Reginald Hargrove, ruddy-cheeked and portly, harumphed into his mustache, a glass of sherry balanced on his knee. Thomas's sister, Felicity, tall, blonde, and possessed of a laugh like tinkling glass, smiled thinly, her eyes flicking to Emily's mud-spattered boots. "I'm terribly sorry," Emily began, her voice steady despite the heat rising in her cheeks. "The A34 was a nightmare, floods, you see, and then my car." "Excuses," Lady Victoria interjected, her tone slicing the air like a guillotine. "One must plan for contingencies. Thomas has spoken so highly of your practicality. Yet here we are, the roast cooling, and our guest delayed by the vulgarities of the highway." Thomas squeezed Emily's hand under the table as they sat to the delayed luncheon, pheasant in a wine reduction, potatoes Anna that flaked like gold leaf, and a Bordeaux from the family cellars that Emily sipped nervously, afraid to spill. Conversation flowed in eddies around her, talk of the Hunt Ball, the estate's shoot, Felicity's engagement to a viscount's son whose family owned half of Shropshire. Emily contributed where she could, praising the silverware's provenance, Georgian, apparently, and the garden's rhododendrons, but each word felt like stepping on eggshells. It was midway through the pear tart tatin, poached in Armagnac, served with clotted cream, that the incident unfolded. Sir Reginald, emboldened by his third glass, launched into a monologue on the decline of British manufacturing. "Take the motor trade," he boomed, gesturing with his fork. "All off to the continent now. Remember my old Bentley? Built like a tank, that one. None of this Japanese nonsense." Emily, fork paused mid-air, seized the moment to bridge the chasm. "Actually, my Fiesta's Japanese, Toyota engine, I think, but it's held up better than most. Fixed an old Cavalier on the way here, actually. Battery leads crossed, but a quick jump sorted it." Felicity arched a perfectly plucked eyebrow. "You fixed a car? On the A34? Oh, yes. Poor old dear was stranded in the rain. Doris, her name was. From round Wheaton Way, I reckon." Lady Victoria's fork clattered against porcelain. "Doris Wilkins, did you say?" Emily blinked. "That's right. Knew her?" The room fell silent, save for the tick of an antique clock. Sir Reginald's face drained of color, his sherry forgotten. Thomas looked baffled, but Lady Victoria's eyes softened, just a fraction, like frost yielding to dawn. "Doris Wilkins," she repeated, as if tasting the name. "My sister." The revelation hung in the air, thicker than the clotted cream. Emily's mind reeled. Sister? The Dowager Countess and a rain-soaked widow in a clapped-out Vauxhall? It didn't compute. But as the story unraveled over coffee in the library, black, strong, and served in Meissen cups, the pieces slotted into place with the inexorability of a well-oiled lock. Victoria Hargrove, née Wilkins, had been the elder daughter of a Northampton solicitor, born in 1945 amid the rubble of post-war austerity. Doris, 2 years her junior, was the wild one, the girl who climbed trees in her pinafore, who sneaked out to rock and roll dances while Victoria pored over debrets. Their father, a stern Presbyterian, had groomed Victoria for society, the right schools, the right suitors. Reginald Hargrove, heir to Ashford, had swept in at a debutante ball in '64, all Brill-cream and ambition. The wedding was a society splash, St. Margaret's, Westminster, with the Queen Mother sending regrets. But Doris? Doris had rebelled. At 18, she'd run off with a mechanic from the local garage, Tommy Wilkins, grease under his nails and dreams in his eyes. They'd married in a registry office, honeymooned in a caravan on the Norfolk Broads. Victoria, ever the dutiful daughter, had cut ties at their father's insistence. "She's made her bed," he'd said, and Victoria, torn but tethered by expectation, had nodded. Letters went unanswered, Christmases unshared. When Tommy died young, of a heart attack at 42, straining an engine block, Doris had written once, a scrawled note pleading for reconciliation. Victoria, pregnant with Felicity and buried in estate duties, had let it vanish into the desk drawer. Decades passed. Doris scraped by on a widow's pension, mending neighbors' kettles and growing prize leeks for the village show. Victoria ascended, dame of committees, patron of charities, the iron fist in a velvet glove. Whispers in the family spoke of the disgraced aunt, a ghost story to keep the children in line. "Don't end up like Aunt Doris," Felicity had been told, though she'd never met the woman. And now, Emily, rain-drenched, sandwich-munching Emily, had bridged the unbridgeable. "She gave me a ham buddy," Emily said softly, the absurdity breaking the tension. "Best one I've had in ages." Sir Reginald cleared his throat, dabbing at his eyes with a monogrammed hanky. "Doris always did make a mean sandwich. Tommy used to say she could flavor cardboard and make it gourmet." Thomas, piecing it together, turned to his mother. "You never said." "I was ashamed," Victoria admitted, her voice a whisper that echoed in the vaulted room. "Ashamed of my own blood. Father drilled it into us, upward, always upward. But Doris, she chose love over legacy. And I let envy fester. Envy of her freedom, her fire." The library, with its leather-bound tomes and the scent of beeswax polish, became a confessional. Victoria spoke of the regrets that had gnawed like damp rot, the births she'd missed, the funerals unattended, the sisterly bonds severed by class's cruel blade. Reginald, for all his bluster, confessed his role, urging Victoria to forget the past to protect the Hargrove name. Even Felicity, peeling back her polished veneer, admitted to curiosity about this phantom aunt, the one who'd inspired tales of rebellion in her nanny's bedtime stories. By dusk, with the rain easing to a mist that softened the parkland views, a plan coalesced. Thomas, ever the optimist, proposed a drive to Wheaton. Now. Before the moment slips. Victoria hesitated, her hands twisting the pearls like rosary beads. Then, with a nod that cost her a lifetime's pride, she agreed. The Bentley was summoned, not the vintage, but the practical one, with heated seats and a satin AV that Reginald grumbled about, bloody German nonsense. Emily rode shotgun, her presence the quiet anchor. As they motored down the A34, now slick with twilight, conversation flowed freer than the wine at lunch. Stories tumbled out, Doris's wedding, a knees up in the local pub with sausage rolls and a fiddler, Victoria's elopement nerves, hidden behind a veil of tulle, the time the sisters had stolen their mother's lipstick and painted the cat, only to blame the gardener's boy. Wheaton Beck was a huddle of red brick terraces and a co-op that glowed like a beacon. Doris's bungalow crouched at the end of Laburnum Lane, its front garden a riot of gnomes and geraniums, fairy lights strung against the gathering dark. Reginald parked with uncharacteristic care, and they approached as a procession, awkward, hopeful. Doris answered the bell in a cardigan the color of porridge, her hair pinned in victory rolls. "Victoria?" The name escaped as a breath, disbelief etching deeper lines on her face. "Sis." Victoria stepped forward, arms opening like rusted hinges. They collided in a hug that was all elbows and sobs, the rain-scented mackintosh enveloping the pearls. Emily hung back, tears pricking, as the sisters clung. Reginald shuffled his feet, then enveloped Doris in a bearish embrace, muttering about bloody long overdue. Thomas and Felicity hovered, then joined, a knot of Hargroves and Wilkins's unraveling years of silence. Inside, the bungalow was a time capsule, floral lino, a Rayburn stove puffing warmth, and on the mantel, faded photos of Tommy in overalls, grinning beside a half-built Austin. Doris brewed tea, proper builders, strong enough to strip paint, and unearth more sandwiches, this time with cheese and chutney from her own plums. Stories cascaded like the kettle's steam, the sisters' childhood escapades, skinny dipping in the canal, Doris's tales of Tommy's garage, where locals bartered labor for laughs, Victoria's confessions of lonely nights in the hall, staring at the moon and wondering about the road not taken. As the clock struck 9, with the fairy lights twinkling outside, Doris turned to Emily. "You, lass. You're the spark. If you hadn't stopped." Emily waved it off, cheeks flushing. "Just did what anyone would." "Not anyone," Victoria said firmly, her hand on Doris's. "You saw a stranger and made her family." The drive back to Ashford was subdued, laced with laughter that bubbled up unexpectedly. Reginald hummed an old Glenn Miller tune, off-key but joyous. Thomas squeezed Emily's knee, his eyes shining with that same charm that had hooked her in London. "My hero," he whispered. In the days that followed, the thaw deepened. Doris became a fixture, Sunday lunches at the hall, where her ham buddies outshone the cordon bleu chef, garden parties where she regaled guests with tales of Tommy's escapades, scandalizing the dowagers. Felicity, shedding her socialite shell, took driving lessons from her aunt, learning not just the mechanics, but the grit. Sir Reginald, in a fit of nostalgia, had the Bentley serviced at a modern garage, but only after Doris had given it a once-over with her late husband's ghost. For Emily, the change was seismic. No longer the outsider in mud boots, she was woven into the tapestry, teacher by day, kin by choice. Wedding plans, once a minefield of guest lists and venues, bloomed with inclusivity, Doris insisting on a Cayley band, Victoria yielding with a smile. And on the eve of the ceremony, in the rose parlor where it had all begun, the two sisters sat by the fire, glasses of sherry in hand. "To kindness," Doris toasted, her eyes crinkling. "To family," Victoria replied. Outside, the A34 whispered past, carrying strangers to their fates. But for Emily Hargrove, soon to be Hargrove Wilkins, perhaps, the road ahead was clear, paved with buddies and unbreakable bonds.